Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Uncertainty abounds for Monday Night Football between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Seattle Seahawks, with Jalen Hurts questionable due to an illness, and also Geno Smith up in the air, potentially Drew Lock starting once again for the Seattle Seahawks. Props are still up, though, and things are still bettable over at FanDuel Sportsbook. We're going to break down what we're seeing as of right now after considering the uncertainty with both Hurts and with Geno, and then breaking down where we see value for Monday night over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Saunas. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Monday by Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. And Ryan, kind of interesting game coming up tonight, given all the things that are up in the air. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Jim. We had a fun 2 days of football, 3 days in a row we get with the Monday night game. This game actually being flexed into the spot as it was originally going to be Patriots Chiefs. So I think we potentially dodged one there if we can get some of these some of the quarterback situation figured out before lock tonight. But this is going to be a fun one, and I'm excited to break it down with you.
Yeah, Geno Smith versus Marcus Mariota or Drew Lock versus Marcus Mariota is still more intriguing than watching Bailey Zappi and Hunter Henry and all those things. So I'm in favor of that personally. Very okay with that. And honestly, if we can get an island game for your classmate, effectively Drew Lock, I think that's not a terrible thing, right?
Not a terrible thing at all. Not a terrible thing at all.
Yeah, we're going to break down this game. It does seem as though it's trending towards Jalen Hurts playing, just based on the way the market has moved. The Eagles back out to 3.5 right now. Total still at 45, which is well below where it was when things opened. We're going to break down where the market stands right now, where we think it could go later on. Try to get you ready for Monday night in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We are here every weekday breaking down the NFL. We'll be talking some college football once again next week for the semifinals and much more, all right here in this same face. To get the Covering the Spread podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, just search for it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. You can find us there. And while you're there, if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating as well. You can also find Covering the Spread on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame moneyline wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, or visit ksgamblinghealth.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text OPEN-Y in New York. Let's dig in now, Ryan, to this matchup between the Eagles and the Seahawks right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. The Eagles are 3.5-point favorites, and the total in this game is 45.5. And obviously, a lot of question marks here, given the uncertainty for both quarterbacking rooms. As of right now, I would lean towards thinking that Geno Smith sits in favor of Drew Lock, and I would lean towards Jalen Hurts playing, at least based on what the market is saying as of right now. So Ryan, based on the info we've got here at 8:13 Eastern on Monday morning, any traditional markets you want to lock in before the news becomes more concrete?
Yeah, I mean, from a traditional market standpoint, I could consider locking in the under, just because especially if we're not getting Hurts, it's going to be, Mariota against Lock. I just think those two teams lean on the run and try and, just battle it out in that way. We know that Pete Carroll loves to, lean on the run in every opportunity and facet that he can. And Marcus Mariota is probably efficient enough to, not do enough explosive plays to hit on what it is right now with the over being at 45. It is interesting with the, line moving in the spread market, with the hook being back in. You think that Hurts is likely to play and know that he traveled separately with the team and all of that. I still think he's a long shot to play, but we've seen this happen before, especially on island games where it is a true game time decision, and all the way up to lock we might not even know. So that would be probably my merit right now, is to lock in the under at 45, because if Hurts gets ruled out, I expect that number to drop significantly. I do think it's interesting too, like and we'll talk about this, but I just wanted to get into it. Like, I'm pretty sure we've known about Geno Smith status and likely not to play. Like, I think he's a way longer shot than Jalen Hurts, and we have the Jalen Hurts market props up on the FanDuel Sportsbook. So that one is interesting to me, because I think it's a foregone conclusion that we are going to get Drew Lock again tonight for the second game in a row.
I think the same too. And that's part of why my model showed value in the under earlier on this week. We talked about that on the Tuesday show, where I took the under there at 48. With it being at 45 right now, if I assume it is Hurts who starts the Eagles and Locke who starts for the Seahawks, I have it at 44.5. So pretty close to 45 right now. The pace in this game is still pretty good. There's some potential rain, but the wind is low at 3 miles per hour. So still keeps it somewhat high. But like you said, it does lean more towards the under, and that's assuming that Hurts plays. If Hurts does not go, that would come down obviously as well. So I think that if you get a read that you think that Hurts may not go, then the under is definitely pretty attractive. Where it stands right now, I think it's a stay away from me personally. And then as far as the spread goes, I do think it's like somewhat interesting to check out Seattle. I don't know. My model always has a tough time with the Eagles, because they're not the most efficient passing team, and it cares a lot about passing efficiency. I've got the Eagles favored by 2.1 right now in the model that is less harsh towards them. So, and that's assuming that Lock goes. I don't know. I have a hard time trusting these things when it comes to the Eagles. It's been good the past 2 weeks, obviously, with the Cowboys and the 49ers kind of running away with things. But
yeah,
I do think that I do worry that it underrates them because of how much weight it puts in passing offense. So I think, honestly, for me, traditional markets are a stay away as of right now. But I think if I were to go with one, I'd lean towards what you said, Ryan, with the under at 45. I think at minus 110. I think that's the one spot that I could potentially be talked into right now. Otherwise, I think it's a stay away for me.
Yeah, and it is interesting just when you think about like Mariota, like coming back into the mix here. The last time we saw him was 2022, and he struggled mightily that season on the road against Atlanta. It is ironic that the last time he won a road game, he had 4 straight losses on the road. And then previous to that, the last time he won a road game was with Atlanta against Seattle, in Seattle, 27-23. So that makes for a little fun caveat there. But, I think this is a tough one where, if Mariota's out there, I do see them trying to, keep the ball out of his hands as much as possible, which kind of, is a juxtaposition, because you have 2 explosive wide receivers there to be able to move the ball against Seattle. But I just don't know how much firepower they'll have tonight if it is Mariota.
Well, of course he won, because it's the Mariota homecoming, at least for college narrative back in the Northwest. Right. That's the whole reason. It's not because of anything else. It's because he was back where he played, or near where he played his college ball. You mentioned those explosive wide receivers. So let's talk about the Eagles props right now. Because again, it looks like FanDuel Sportsbook is assuming Jalen Hurts goes, which I would assume as well. And props are pretty lofty for guys like AJ Brown, especially when you're considering the cornerbacks they're facing. So when you look at the Eagles props, Ryan, anything stand out to you as far as being spots you may want to attack? Again, acknowledging right now we don't know for sure that Hurts will play.
Yeah, I think for me, where it starts and stops is DeAndre Swift. I mean, you're looking at his rushing prop being at 58.5, and that's with Jalen Hurts props being live. So I think that could definitely creep up into the 60 range should Hurts get rolled out, and I just think this is the perfect time to get DeAndre Swift right. Now, I will say that I have heard, and I can't take credit for this, but I was listening to others in the industry talk about how this is the most touches that DeAndre Swift has had in his career already to this point. And so you think about his time with the Lions and just kind of mixing in other pieces. So I do think it's interesting, like, do they try and get Kenneth Gainwell involved? When you're looking at Kenneth Gainwell props, he's not listed in the rushing market, but he does have a receiving prop of 8.5. I think that could be somewhat interesting there for them to work in other pieces. Maybe you try and get Gainwell a little bit more involved in the idea that you might lean on him come playoff time to get going, because he has been there for quite some time in that system. So, I think the running backs is definitely where I look at from the receiver standpoint. It does make it trust these guys, even as explosive as they are. Like, love AJ Brown, love Devonta Smith, but I feel like their prop market is probably right on right now. The one interesting piece for me is Dallas Goedert, coming back into the mix, and Mariota potentially leaning on that tight end. 4.5 is his reception prop, and it's plus 118. I could maybe get behind that one. Tight ends are a position that I've looked to target Seattle against this year. All year. So Goddard would be the one receiver who I would be interested in Philly should we get Mariota playing, and I'd go ahead and lock that in now.
Yeah, I agree with you on Goddard. 4.5 receptions, plus 118, over 42.5 receiving yards, minus 113. And you mentioned tight ends against Seattle, and I agree with that because their outside corners are so good, which is why I initially thought that A.J. Brown's receiving yardage mark seemed pretty high at 82.5. So I would look towards the under there at minus 113 personally on A.J. Brown. I think that one's pretty lively regardless of whether Hurts is able to go, just because it's a big number against a team with some really quality cornerback play. Devontae Smith, I think, is pretty fair at 60.5, so not looking at unders there. But I think an under on A.J. Brown, 82.5, over on Dallas Goedert, 42.5, or the 4.5 receptions, as you mentioned, at plus 118. Both those pretty lively. I do want to go back to the backfield here. You mentioned Kenneth Gainwell, and his rushing plus receiving prop is 25.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Yep. Over the past 3 games, he has had 36, 47, 28. He didn't go over this number a ton before then, but it's been weird where it seems like they've been a bit wishy-washy with Swift in especially the second halves of games for some reason. Now, he got to 28 yards last week on just 4 carries and no targets. So Gainwell's role is pretty flimsy, but would you have interest in the rushing plus receiving for Gainwell at 25.5, given that he does occasionally get some targets as well?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting call out, Jim, because I do think, hold on one sec. Oh, that was a sneeze.
That means it's never going to come out. It's stuck in there forever now. You're going to be cursed the rest of the day. I am so sorry, Ryan.
It did. It wanted to spare those listening to covering the spread today. So appreciate that. But no, I do think it's interesting. And I think it's just because, like I said, if his touches are getting, to that peak where they don't want to overuse DeAndre Swift, especially in the game where they're able to, kind of control it. I think we could see Gainwell come out there and spell a little bit and just lean on him. Or if Seattle is running with this game and Philly just has to chalk it up and move on to next week, then I think we get Gainwell out there even more so. So yeah, getting some action on Gainwell I think is very, very smart the way that this game is shaping up for us.
Okay, let's talk about the other side here with the Seattle Seahawks. As you said, I agree with you. I think that they're kind of assuming that it is Geno Smith here and not Drew Lock, or sorry, Drew Lock and not Geno Smith for this game. With that assumption in mind, Ryan, any value for you on the Seattle side of things?
Yeah, I think the first player that I look at is DK, just because he's so explosive. I know Lockett was kind of banged up early in the week, and now he's pretty much set to go. But it seems like Metcalf is that kind of catalyst that always gets going with these quarterbacks here, and everybody forgets about him. You know, he hasn't had the stellar year. He has come on late, which you love to see. You know, a touchdown in 2 of the past 3 games. You know, kind of getting closer to that century mark from a receiving standpoint. So I think there is some merit to taking DK Metcalf 63.5 on the yardage prop, especially with Darius Slay set to miss this game as well too. So he could definitely get some chances at some long ones. The other person or the other receiver who I like looking at is Jackson Smith and Jigba. The reason being is because I feel like, you know, this is really, you know, the last 4 weeks of the season, just for whatever reason, these rookies start to catch their stride. They start to get utilized and involved more. And he's kind of been a consistent piece, you know, for this offense. He hasn't really had, you know, too many explosive games, so to speak, without somebody missing, but he just has kind of always been there. Then you get the backup narrative with the backup quarterback and the rookie wide receiver, and they could have spent time together. So I think him at 43.5 is definitely interesting. No reception props on these guys open as of yet. But when we look at DK Metcalf's, you know, longest reception, you're looking at 23.5 there at -114. That's also something that I would be interested in. The one other piece, Jim, before I toss it to you that I wanted to bring up is Noah Fant. Noah Fant seeing, you know,
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, he's seeing 4 targets last week in Drew Lock's, you know, first start of the year. They played together in Denver, came over together to Seattle. So I do think that there is some merit there. And especially, you know, with one of the outside corners being out, maybe there's some chances for Noah Fant to get loose. So I think, you know, getting in action on him, what is he, 21.5 on his receiving prop? Again, no reception prop there. But that reception prop market is really where I would look at for Noah Fant, because I feel like he can, you know, get around 4 or 5 targets again in a game like this.
Yeah, I mean the main thing is the Eagles linebackers, and the secondary thing is very much that they used to play together. I always love going back towards Noah Fant and Drew Lock as a result of that, and like it's a joke, but also like Noah Fant was pretty involved last week. 4 targets, 35 yards. He's had 35, 43, and 25 yards across his past 3 games. And he gets a lot of like weird explosive downfield targets, so you can get to a 21.5 mark pretty quickly. So I think that's intriguing for Noah Fant at 21.5 receiving yards. And the JSN angle you mentioned, I think, is also pretty enticing, because there was that game where Smith hurt his elbow earlier on this year. I think it might have been the Rams game where he got hurt in the second half and Locke took over. And Locke had a couple deep targets to Jackson Smith and Jigba in that game. And JSN hadn't been getting deep targets before that. And he's kind of still been getting them since then. But I think it's like you mentioned, where it's the backup angle, the guys who've kind of worked a bit together on the second team offense, gelling pretty well. So JSN 43.5 receiving yards. I also agree that that's somewhat enticing for the Seahawks. So I think I agree with you on both those guys as being interesting based on the way they've been used recently, specifically when we look at Drew Lock. Now with the backfield, I wanted to take unders on Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet. I think FanDuel Sportsbook is pretty wise to that, as their numbers are pretty low. So I'm going to wind up staying away from that. I think if I were looking at like once rush attempt props are up, given that they're kind of splitting work, maybe look towards unders there. But with where things stand right now, I do believe the markets are pretty properly illustrating how poor the roles are for Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker III when both those guys are healthy. Any other props you're digging for Monday night, Ryan?
You know, as of right now, it does make it tough. You know, because I would love to get you know, interception props going, but we only have Jalen Hurts who's listed there as of right now, and pretty much all of the passing yeah, all the passing props right now consist around Jalen Hurts. So that's a little frustrating. I do think it is interesting to, get some action on Jason Myers, the kicker there for Seattle. In this game, you're looking at over 6.5 points being minus 102. And he's a guy that definitely, kicks better at home, has been pretty consistent for them. So I think that's always an interesting prop to think about and bring up. But yeah, I think we're kind of staying in the traditional markets, so to speak, right now. I might look into getting some first half, second half action on Seattle once we get the quarterback situation figured out. But it is kind of tough to kind of see that game playing out. So you just kind of get with what you know for the time being. But I am curious to see if Hurts does give it a go because so much is on the line for their season here with a couple weeks left.
Yeah, with the kicking stuff with Myers, it does help a lot that the wind is so low. So I think that is very beneficial when it comes to Jason Myers. 6.5 points over his minus 102, as Ryan mentioned. I hope it hurts because as much as I love Marcus Mariota, it's a little bit more of a joke. And I'd really much rather watch Jalen Hurts on my TV for Monday night than Mariota. So get healthy, Jalen. Hopefully we can see you out there on Monday night. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. But don't worry, Ryan is back with us once again tomorrow. We'll be talking some futures here on the show, and the wildcard races on both sides are still chaotic as all get up. So we're going to break down all of that tomorrow right here on the show. To get that as it is posted, make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. And also don't forget to check us out on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. Ryan, a pleasure to have you on as always. Enjoy tonight's game. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow.
Yeah, you as well, Jim. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace.
All right, fine. Find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. I'm on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis and find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets across Monday Night Football. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. Talk futures and get you ready for Week 16. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.